At Unchained, it's our mission to help our clients hold the private key to their Bitcoin and secure it over many generations. The following webinar is a presentation Jeff Vandrew and I gave in January 2023 about the Unchained Inheritance Protocol and how to form a comprehensive Bitcoin inheritance plan. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to the Unchained Retirement and Inheritance webinar on the Unchained Inheritance Protocol. My name is Phil Geiger. I'm the head of product marketing at Unchained. I'm joined this morning with Jeff Vandrew, our general counsel. And we're speaking about a topic that I personally am very excited about because when I think about my Bitcoin, I'm thinking about establishing the Geiger Bitcoin dynasty and figuring out how to pass it on to multiple generations beyond myself. So I think about Bitcoin over the course of hundreds of years and how to pass this thing on down through the generations. A few housekeeping items before we get started. The chat box over on the right side is available for kind of general chat. If you do have a question that you would like me or Jeff to address at the end of the presentation, please put that in the question box. So the question box is right to the left of the chat box on the right side of Livestorm here. We might run a few polls. You might see a few calls to action. If you would like to download these slides, you can just hover your mouse over the slides and you'll see the option to download them. With that, I think that's all we have for our housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and so you can view it immediately afterwards through Livestorm, or it will be posted to our YouTube channel for viewing afterwards. And with that, I think we can jump into it. We have a lot to cover this morning. We're going to talk about how Unchained really views inheritance overall. But before we dive into what Unchained has recently released in our inheritance protocol, Jeff is going to go through a few legal terms about inheritance, and then we're going to dive into the details of the inheritance protocol. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Jeff Vandrew to kind of dive into the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Great to be here, man. So as Phil said, there are a few legal concepts that are really important to sort of internalize before we get into the actual Unchained Inheritance Protocol. And the one big key distinction that causes a lot of confusion, especially for Bitcoiners, is the difference between title to your Bitcoin and possession of your Bitcoin. Those are very, very important distinctions to keep in mind. So title, what that means is that you are legally entitled to the Bitcoin. It is yours. You have legal ownership of it. Possession may or may not follow with title. Possession means that it is, as the term implies, just literally in your physical possession. So it's very important when we're talking about planning for inheritance that whoever you want to pass those Bitcoins to when you pass away needs to be able to get both legal title and possession. They need both sides. A lot of Bitcoiners are under the impression that possession is enough, meaning that, you know, if I just happen to leave my keys to someone and they're able to find the keys, that's their Bitcoin. And that's not true. That person has possession in that case, but they don't have title. To illustrate how that can be a problem, I like to talk about a thief because that's the classic example of a person who has possession, but not title. And I like to talk about just tangible items because, you know, we're all just cavemen living in the modern world. So it's easier for us to kind of grok that kind of thing in our brain. So if Phil has a big giant bar of gold sitting on his kitchen counter, that if that's his, he has title and he has possession of it. If while Phil's asleep, I slip in through his front door and I grab that bar of gold and I walk out with it, I have possession of that gold bar, but I don't have good title. A thief doesn't get a good title to anything that he steals. And that means something legally. What it means is if Phil knows that I'm the guy that took it, you know, maybe he has a security camera, maybe he knows that I'm the only guy with a spare key to get into his kitchen, whatever the case might be, Phil can sue me and bring me into court. and he can get his gold back through the court system. That's not even to mention, the criminal process that may also be going on at the same time. We're just talking about civil stuff in this situation. Well, a loved one of yours that gets possession of your keys after you pass away, but doesn't have title passed to them through appropriate estate planning documents, may unfortunately be in the position of a thief, where other relatives or loved ones that you didn't want to be the ones that ultimately got that Bitcoin, they could sue that person who has the keys to try to recover those Bitcoin, right? So you don't want your loved ones to have to deal with a lawsuit at all. You especially don't want them to have to deal with like a judgment from a court that says, hey, you have to sign this transaction transferring the coins over to XYZ person or else you go to jail, right? Because that's another thing a lot of people don't realize. People can think, well, a judge can't do anything to me if I have the private keys. He can't compel me to move them. That's wrong. Unfortunately, if you are ordered by a court to sign a transaction and you don't do it, that's contempt of court, and you can actually go to prison for that. So with that in mind, when we're talking about the inheritance protocol, one of the very important parts of that is setting up the legal documents, a comprehensive Bitcoin inheritance plan that will ensure that title to those coins is going to pass. And that's something that we have to do even before we get into the possession stuff, which is obviously also equally important. So, as I said, with respect to title, the way that's handled is by drafting an estate plan with an attorney. It would be illegal for us to do that for you at Unchained, because passage of title to all property, not just Bitcoin, is a matter of state law. Generally speaking, federal law is not a part of the process. So not only do you need an attorney, you typically need an attorney who is a member of the bar in the state where you live, in order to draw up those documents for you. The real basic documents, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these, but at a minimum are going to be a will, a power of attorney, separate and apart from your Bitcoin, probably a medical power of attorney. And we're going to talk about the advantages of also using various different types of trusts as part of that plan. Possession is where the meat of the inheritance protocol comes in, and that's what Phil's going to talk about once we get a little later in the presentation. And that is the flip side of everything I just talked about before. You don't want your loved ones to end up with title to an asset that they can't actually use because they don't have the private keys and they can't get possession. That's almost as bad as having possession without title, right? So you don't want that either. And those are, a materials package that Phil and in conjunction with our concierge team has put together to make sure that those keys pass safely and securely to your heirs, preserve your privacy, all while avoiding single points of failure, right? That's kind of our thing here at Unchained Capital, collaborative custody, avoiding single points of failure. And then also, making that concierge team available to you, available to your loved ones, I should say. I almost said available to you after you pass away. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But available to your loved ones after you pass away. And the story that I always tell with respect to this is, I don't claim to be the most technical guy in the world, but I am capable of using open source tools to set up my own multi-sig without Unchained. Nevertheless, long before I worked for Unchained, I was an Unchained client. And part of the reason for that was my loved ones were never going to figure out how to deal with that crap when I died, right? I wanted them to have a place to turn for assistance, if something, were to happen to me.
Yeah, and Jeff, before you move on here, I think I just want to recap like a couple really crucial points. So, as Bitcoiners, a lot of times we think like, oh, as long as I have the keys to my Bitcoin, I have my Bitcoin. I don't need to worry about anything else. Inheritance is a very different situation. Whether or not you're interested in the state is interested in you. I stole that line from Jeff Vandrew. And so setting up a good estate plan passes that legal title on to your heirs or loved ones when the time comes. Just giving possession of the keys does not set your Bitcoin dynasty up for success. You have to have title and possession if you're living in the US here.
Thank you. Yes, and that is a key distinction, and that what you said there is right. The law is always interested in you, regardless of whether or not you're interested in the law. And, when those disputes come into play, if you're just one man, as the Clash said, you could fight the law. The law is probably going to win. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the probate process, which is important to understand, because the probate process is actually how that legal title passes from you to your loved ones after you pass away. And I should say to your intended loved ones, hopefully, not to any unintended people that you may or may not love, I guess. So as I mentioned there, the probate process is the process of executing instructions in a will regarding how title to various assets passes. Your will is going to appoint an executor, and his legal job and responsibility is to collect up all your assets. His first job after that is to actually pay off all your debts. He's only allowed to distribute to your beneficiaries after all those debts are paid off. The probate process is designed to protect creditors primarily. The actual process varies a lot from state to state. In some states, it is heavily court supervised, and the executor has to go into court with his lawyer before he does anything. And then each incremental step along the way, they have to go back to court. California is like that. And in California, I think the probate court even takes a percentage of everything that goes through the probate process. Not all states work that way. The classic opposite of California is New Jersey. New Jersey actually has the simplest probate process in the entire United States. You don't have to go to court for anything unless somebody files a suit due to a disagreement. There's typically no judge at all involved at any part in the process whatsoever. Basically, at the end of the process, all the interested parties just sign a document saying they're all satisfied. That gets filed in what's called the surrogate's office, which is just an administrative office in your county. You pay like $35 or something, and that's the end of the deal. It's very, very simple. A lot of states are somewhere in between those two polar extremes of California and New Jersey. So like a state like Texas is kind of in the middle. It's definitely more of a pain than New Jersey, definitely less of a pain than California. But here's the thing with regard to probate. In all states, there are public records filings involved, and that's a problem for Bitcoiners. So this is where we kind of have to deviate a little bit from standard estate planning advice due to, the unique concerns of Bitcoiners. And what I mean by that is, like, if you live in California, any estate planning lawyer you roll up to is going to tell you got to avoid probate because it's such an awful, terrible process, right? So you're covered there. If you live in New Jersey, most estate planners are going to tell you, you don't have to worry about avoiding probate. It's just not a big deal. It's inexpensive. The majority of people in New Jersey don't even use attorneys to go through probate, believe it or not. Larger estates do, but in smaller states, that it's not a big deal. The caveat here is, though, that in all states, there are public records filings involved, which is not normally a big deal to most people. It typically is a big deal if you're a Bitcoiner, because one of the things listed in those public records that get filed as part of the probate process is a rough list of the assets. So you may not want, there to be a public record out there that says you owned 100 Bitcoin when you died, and here are the two people that 100 Bitcoin passed to. That's probably going to be a security concern for them. If you're like me, you worry about $5 wrench attacks a lot more than being hacked. That could potentially make you a target for a $5 wrench attack. So you do, as a Bitcoiner, typically want to avoid probate, even if you were in a state where that is typically, for most, let's say non-Bitcoiners, less of a concern. We're also want to talk about here, some assets are inherently not part of the probate process. So those assets are going to be IRAs. IRAs are a creature of federal law. Therefore, they pass pursuant to the beneficiary designation on the IRA itself, rather than through the probate process. TOD and POD accounts, those are special types of accounts that are, well, to guys like me, they're fairly new, right? They only came into play shortly before my time, mostly the 1980s. These became a thing. They're statutory creations, and they allow you to name a death beneficiary directly on a bank or other type of custodial account. And what the statute says is that if you do that, those assets pass out of probate to your loved ones. Life insurance is a creature of contract. It passes outside probate, goes directly to whoever's named on the policy. Annuities work similarly to life insurance. They work the same way. The key one here is revocable living trust. So revocable living trust is basically a mechanism that allows you to move what would normally be probate assets, and therefore, as we discussed on the last slide, in the public record, if you have an attorney draft up a revocable living trust for you and you properly retitle all of your assets before you die out of your personal name into that revocable living trust, you will avoid probate. You also don't give anything up by doing that because you're still able to use the assets as if they were titled in your own personal name during your lifetime. As the name of the trust implies, you can change it or revoke it at any time as well. So it really is just a probate avoidance mechanism. And most importantly for Bitcoiners is a privacy protection tool. I got a little ahead of myself there, a couple slides ahead. This kind of just goes over what I just discussed. The main benefit there is there's no public records filings. You do need an attorney to do this. So you have to meet with an attorney in your state of residence, have that document drafted up. And then the key is that the probate avoidance mechanism only works if you actually retitle your assets. So with regard to your bank account, you got to go to the bank, retitle your checking account out of Phil Geiger into the Phil Geiger Living Trust. You got to do that with your brokerage accounts. You have to do it with your Unchained vault. We do offer living trust titled vaults. That is something you can set up through Unchained and then move your coins into that living trust titled vault in order to avoid probate. So with that said, I mean, that covers sort of the 10,000 foot overview of the legal stuff that we've got to keep in mind. I'm going to turn it over to Phil to talk more in depth about the Unchained Inheritance Protocol and how it helps us settle that possession part of the equation.
Thanks, Jeff. And really, before I dive into the Unchained Inheritance Protocol, I like to just summarize the key risks that I personally feel as a Bitcoiner to not having a good estate plan. The first risk you talked about is, hey, if I haven't passed on good legal title to my Bitcoin to my heirs, then my heirs can sue each other for possession of it because nobody has the right title, and it can cost my heirs a ton of time and resources, and that's something that I can just prevent by having a trust or a fully fleshed out estate plan. The other aspect there is that like public records filing. So if you just have a will and your Bitcoin goes through probate, like the public courts are going to have your loved ones' home addresses and Bitcoin balances available to essentially everyone. So really forming an estate plan, revocable living trust, or just avoiding probate, I think is really important. It's something that was unique and something that I learned as we were kind of going through this process together. I hadn't really thought through those risks. Now, the Unchained Inheritance Protocol, we really spent a lot of time thinking critically about how to solve the possession side of the equation. Since we can't give legal advice at Unchained, but we are helping our clients hold the private keys to their Bitcoin, we thought that we would start here, how to simply and securely pass on a private key to a loved one or heir after your passing. The way that we do this is the way that we kind of do all of our products at Unchained, which is in a special Bitcoin address called a multi-signature address. Now, this multi-signature address is native to the Bitcoin protocol, but it's essentially a Bitcoin address that is controlled by multiple keys. In this case, our clients hold 2 keys, we hold 1 key, and 2 out of 3 keys are needed to move the Bitcoin. What's really cool about multisig is this is built into Bitcoin. It is native to the Bitcoin protocol. So our clients don't actually need Unchained to even exist to be able to access and spend their Bitcoin. We have very easy recovery tools. What this type of address also allows us to do is separate seed phrases in a way that is not going to reveal your balances today or give a person who has the seed phrase the ability to find or spend your Bitcoin. They just have one piece of the puzzle. So That's what we really focused on with the inheritance protocol. It is carefully designed materials that allow you to simply and securely pass a key onto a non-technical heir. It keeps your Bitcoin balances secret today, and it avoids creating a single point of failure. So if you're doing self-custody on your own and you give a seed phrase to a loved one, if it's a single seed phrase, so the Bitcoin is living in an address controlled by one key, that loved one now actually has your Bitcoin today. They have become a single point of failure for the Bitcoin. If you're doing multi-signature on your own and you give an heir or an executor one key, they have to have more information to be able to find and spend the Bitcoin. So you have to give them additional information while you're alive, which would potentially reveal your Bitcoin balances. So with this collaborative custody model, you're working with Unchained. So Unchained can see kind of the balances of the Bitcoin, but your loved ones and heirs do not see the balances today. Now, how do you get the Unchained Inheritance Protocol? We've decided to include it with all of our concierge onboardings to personal, IRA, or trust vaults. So our concierge onboarding program, if you're new to holding private keys, will send out keys to you. And when I say keys, I'm talking about like a Trezor, a Ledger, a Cold Card, a different hardware wallets that you might have heard of. We'll send out Trezors to you. We will hop on video calls to get everything set up and make sure that you're feeling secure with holding the keys to your Bitcoin in this multi-signature arrangement. And with that comes the Unchained Inheritance Protocol. We'll ship out some nice documents that will allow you to safely and securely pass on a key. This is also available for standalone purchase for existing clients, and we do have an international version available. However, we are not experts in the title side for every single jurisdiction. So we've helped with the possession side, and we've kind of made the title aspect of it a little bit more generic to fit the different inheritance needs internationally. So it is available internationally, but it is kind of a different version that isn't quite as specific for the estate planning portion. Here's a picture of the inheritance protocol. It's essentially a package of documents. It comes with step-by-step instructions, a couple letters, one letter that you give to a loved one or heir while you're alive that says, hey, please protect this thing. One letter that goes inside a tamper-evident bag alongside a inheritance seed phrase, goes inside a tamper-evident bag, only to be opened at the time of your death or incapacitation. The second letter, which is included in the tamper-evident bag with the seed phrase, covers a little bit more information about how you were securing the Bitcoin. So I was working with a company called Unchained. Give them a call. Here's their email. And it's in very, very kind of simple, plain English for those people who maybe are not quite as obsessed with Bitcoin as we might be. So the checklists, they guide you and your executor through fully preparing for the inheritance process, both in terms of title transfer. We have an estate planner evaluation checklist. So as you're going through and calling estate planners and interviewing them, we have some questions that might help you to just get comfortable with that person and see if they're right for you. And then the key succession checklist, which I have just talked about. The letters for the executor and trustee, we spent a lot of time making sure that the language was very plain English. It's not too scary, but it definitely lets your executor know that what they're protecting is a piece of sensitive information. They don't have to understand really anything about Bitcoin. We've taken care of that conversation in just these two letters. The seed phrase and the tamper-evident bag, that's what you drop off at your executor's house with the second letter inside of it. They toss that in a safe or in another secure location. And then you can just kind of check in with them periodically, maybe once a year, to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with. All right. To recap, we've covered a lot of topics this morning. Unchained today helps with the possession side of the equation, but the title side must be handled separately by an estate planner. In the US, that would be an attorney. So you still have to meet with an estate planner to cover all of that legal title side. We help with the possession side and with the recovery. Next, you'll want to onboard to a personal IRA or revocable living trust vault. We can help you through that process through our concierge onboarding. Or if you're technical, you understand multi-sig, you can do it on your own for free. And then you can purchase the inheritance protocol afterwards as a standalone documents package. You'll then want to complete the protocol to distribute a key and interview an estate planner if you need one. And when the time comes, the Unchained concierge team can help talk through recovery as soon as the person who has the key comes to us and proves that they have the legal title to the document, to the seed phrase. All right, that wraps up our presentation for today on the Unchained Inheritance Protocol. If you'd like to learn more about this protocol, as well as our other services, you're welcome to sign up for a free consultation on our website, unchained.com. Thanks so much for watching.